But again, this is not about me. If you have any questions about the community, about anything like that, just find me somewhere here. But this is more important than me. We have today two speakers, Shabanji, I hope I say your name correctly, and Deepak. So welcome. And I will talk few sentences about what AJE is about. We are a community of software developer. As the name suggests, it is like Java, but we are not only Java. Today, presentations could be applied to any other technologies, not just Java. We have very broad range of topics in the past events, and we want to keep that way. Yes, as well. It's I don't think anyone these days can call yourself only like Java developer. We have to do much more than this. So it's run by community for community. It's run only by volunteers. We are not backed by any, I don't know, this is echo? We are not backed by any, I don't know, recruiters, any big enterprise. It's just run by volunteers for other people who feel this way. Right now we are focused on events. Focus is maybe funny words because we didn't run any events in the last 6 months, but yeah, that's basically what we try to do. But if there is any other things you would like to do, just join us. We have a what it's called, Discord server when you can talk about things like that. Yeah, again, it's kind of like weird because we didn't do anything for 6 months. I mean, it seems like we haven't done anything for 6 months, but in the background, I was trying actually to find the venue, which I will talk about later as well, a few minutes. Meritocracy, again, is not that, the more you contribute to the community, you would be more recognized. There is nothing, like past glory or, who you know. It's just basically, that's how I want to run it. Yes, it's basically how much you contribute to the community. And everyone is welcome, no matter the stack experience, tech stack, gender, race, even if you are a dog, you are welcome as well. That's, it's great, like our host have the venue which is pet friendly. But probably we shouldn't mix cats and dogs at the same session. So yeah, as I say, this is community run by members for its members. And without your support, we won't be doing anything. And this is kind of like the ways you can support us, join our events, which you already do. I'm a bit upset that only so many people showed. We have much more signups than actually show up. We have like over 40 signups, and there is only like, I don't know, 15 people, which is a shame. I don't know, is it because of weather or what? I don't really know. It's not like one of the biggest challenges of communities which are run for free. Spread the word about the community. For example, like you sign up for the event, just share with your network at your work that you're going to the event, share on the social media. That's how other people would know about the community. Everybody in my network and some of the people who are here already know about it. Yes, so to get more people, we have to actually use your networks to do it. Yes, and donate money to our community. When you book your ticket at Eventbrite, there's also option to donate something, or you can do it through our Open Collective page. We have already few donors, which is great. And I want to again say a few words about it. You don't have to spend like, I don't know, thousands, hundreds pounds. It's just at the cost of coffee or one takeaway. You can really, the important thing is the scale. The more people we donate, the more money we'll have. Yes, and that will enable our community. For example, like one of the problems we have in the past is to find the venues, and we just found this venue because we have one supporter who actually decided, hey, I can pay for even, this is quite affordable place, but still pay for it. And they, for example, I have a lot of other ideas, but to manage our neighbors, yes. So without this, we cannot do a lot of the things, yes. And it doesn't mean we will go, I don't know, we will, I don't know, drive limousines or stuff like that, yes. We will still frugal as we are now. A lot of the things you can do for free, but not always given the independence. Like I say initially, we are not backed by any like recruiters, by, I don't know, big corporations, stuff like that. We are independent, yes, and having like the funding, it gives us, if we funded the community out by ourselves, that give us, like independence from other organizations. We don't have to worry about, that we have to compromise our, let's say, integrity because we have to do something for someone, yes. Like we have discussion in the community about if we should allow, recruiters. That is one of the easiest way to get support for communities, but most of the people were against it. So, but how to get funding? Yeah, you see the problem, yes, egg and chicken. So this is where you can find more about us. Our website, as I say, Discord. Mostly we are active on LinkedIn, also Meetup, and some of the things we post on Instagram. So another point is that to run these meetups, we need to have also someone to speak. And that's mean we need two speakers, and without those two people who said, yeah, we want to speak on your event, we wouldn't be here today, yes? So, and also that's go to the wider community, yes? If you have something, you work with some technology, you learn something, why not submit the session to Sessionize and just come to the community? As you see, the group is not overwhelming, the venue is very friendly. So why, even if it's your first talk, you never talked before, why not start here? Yeah, that was kind of like the initial idea of this event. Give people, I'm trying to get better at speaking, but like you see, I'm not really good at it. And the idea was, hey, I want to speak, how can I practice? Yes, it's just like running events like that, yes, for people like me as well. I don't know, what is that? Yeah, the sessions are also recorded and streamed at our friend Wojtek at his channel. So again, you can watch, for example, myself. I will watch later how crap I am as a speaker. And yeah, we have actually few supporter companies. Sivo, which Josh is over there. If you have any questions about the venue, Josh will say a few words as well. Yeah, Jigstra. Yeah, Jackstra. He's South African. Yes, word. Yeah, so he's very difficult. So Robert is there. You are kind of like service company. So if you have any, I don't know, idea about the product, you don't have developers, or in your company you're looking for someone to help you with your project, to speak with Robert. This event wouldn't happen actually without Robert and this track, because Robert is paying for the venue basically, yes. And Apron, which we just can get, which is, a lot of you know, Dmitry is his company, and they decided to support us just like few days ago through the Open Collective, yes. So, and he will speak up because he is helping me with the door. So probably he will speak few words about his company during the break. And that was really long introduction, I guess, but I'm done. So Shabanji, save me so I don't have to talk anymore. And we will
it is. Okay, all right. Yeah, thank you. Hey everyone, good evening. I'm Shubhangi. I'm going to be presenting a session on applications with Microsoft Foundry. Anybody who has used Microsoft Foundry before? Okay, where is introduction before we start?
presentation is not in yet. So present.
I did.
And I screen just.
Yeah, I see. It's showing. Is it showing now?
Okay.
Okay. So we'll restart again. So hi everyone, good evening. I'm Shubhangi. I am going to be presenting a session on applications with Microsoft Foundry. Anybody who has used Foundry before? Any show of hands? It's one person. So we'll ask difficult questions from you to the end. For everyone else who has not used, this is all about AI, and Microsoft Foundry is an enterprise AI platform that is obviously built by Microsoft to facilitate building agents, guardrails, evaluation workflows, and a lot more. So in the first part of this session, I'm going to give like a small intro of like what the tool is all about, what you can do with it. We'll show some examples of how you can create agents with that. And in the end of the session, I'm just going to touch base on context engineering. It's obviously not a part of this talk. I just added that because I feel it's important to highlight that bit and like cover like its whole cycle basically. So a quick intro about myself. I am a senior analyst. I work at a leading FTSE company in the UK. I'm also a Microsoft MVP in AI platform. And I previously worked for a Microsoft partner as well for 5 years. And before that, I was at Tata Group for another 3 years. So total, I have 10 years of experience. I am a speaker, so I support tech communities by sharing my knowledge, sessions, and projects. And yeah, that's all about me in a nutshell. So as I said, this is the agenda for today. There are going to be 4 main things. All things Foundry. There's going to be discussion about architecture, what it entails, some components, and then context engineering. So let's start from the beginning. As I said, Microsoft Foundry is Azure's enterprise platform. It's used to create any kind of AI operations, model building, or anything which you need around that. And it's basically a production grade platform rather than something which you can just think of as an infrastructure. So if you are a developer, an AI engineer, or anything around that, you can basically use Microsoft Foundry to build enterprise scale applications. And in that, you have agents, you have evaluation workflows, you have guardrails. I'm sure many of you would have heard these buzzwords somewhere on LinkedIn post floating around, or you might have heard on blogs or probably people talking about it. So we'll see some examples of how you can create that. So essentially, there are four main things it offers. Firstly, you can build any kind of AI applications or AI agents using that, and it's pretty secure because it offers a lot of options to build, guardrails and test the outputs. The second one is you can build, test, any kind of AI tools or ML workflows. The third one is, which is I think probably my favorite, is like you can collaborate with your team as well. It creates like a full life cycle of the product that you are building, and then you can work across various model providers. So it has everything from Claude's Claude to like Grok and anything possibly you can think of. So it does offer a lot of models. So we'll start by looking at it. What it does it look like? So if you look at my screen, this is the UI of like how it looks like. And this is probably the old version, I would say. So if you click on this toggle, you will enter the newer version, which is currently being built. This is the model catalog. So model catalog, as the name suggests, is basically an area where you find all the latest information about your models, what these benchmarks are around which you can compare those models, and then like which one you should use while building your application or agent. So anything that comes latest will be generally on the top. So you will be able to see like what's the latest version. So you can see there is new like GPT real time launched on this platform. There is Sonnet 5 available. There is Cohere. As we scroll downwards, you can see like a lot of different models categorized by quality, safety, cost, and throughput. Anyone, any guesses why this is needed? You can be wrong, but you can be right. You can just guess. Any ideas? Oh. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think that partly answers the question. It's right. So what normally happens is like people like to build agents, and I would say by this time I've seen already everybody has built an agent. I probably have also built several. The problem here is none of them actually enters production, and they don't actually like enter production is because a lot of times these metrics are not taken into consideration in the start. So most of the time people will be like, oh, I know, I think Sonnet is great, so let's use Sonnet. But why would you use Sonnet? Why not use 4.1? Right? Why wouldn't you use Opus? So this leaderboard basically gives you an insight into like how different models are performing against one another. And if you click on this version, basically it will give you a lot more detail about everything. Like it's a quality index, and as you can see, it has rated 5.5 on the top, comparing a lot more models. And if you go downwards, you will be able to see different highlights, like in more detail. So it shows you about the quality index, like which one is better than the other. Safety for some applications, for example, if you're building for healthcare, or like areas where you want like a lot more cautiousness in terms of like the attack rate, you will want to prepare or like use more safer version of the model. And there is benchmarking cost and there is throughput. So benchmarking cost is basically like how's the quality of a data set compared to like US dollars that you're investing. And throughput is essentially like tokens per second in summary. So token is a word I would say by far everyone would know, right? Yeah, cool. So token is basically like the like in this one you would expect like if the throughput is higher, it's better. So you wouldn't want a higher throughput in this case. So the main thing here is like before you start building an application, you should really know which model you want to use, not just like in theory, but actually like what metrics I'm gonna tell to my customer. If you're a B2B business or if you are like somebody who is selling product from one organization to another, because a lot more times these discussions happen just within the technical teams, but sometimes your customers also understand how the large language model is built. So if you are like dealing in those cases, you should really know these arenas before building it. And towards the bottom, it also gives you like a trade-off chart. So this is like, as the name suggests, it gives you comparison between two things like quality versus benchmarking versus safety versus throughput. Now, by default, it will select 10 models, but if you scroll down, you can select as many models as you would want to see. And every single time you will select, it will update itself, and it will show you on this section which model probably is the best model to use according to it. And then obviously there is a lot of trade-off involved. You have to decide for yourself. Are you happy with having quality versus benchmark, or do you want to go for more like safer models here, which it shows Cloud Opus, for example, or GPT, or if you want to care more about throughput. So it totally depends. So let's say an example of this one. So let's say today if I decide to build a voice agent, right? And I'm trying to place a customer interaction agent or create something which supports it, right? And I want it to carry 80% of the job. That means my user should only go to an agent only if it's needed at all. Like it should not go for any small query. I want the response in a minute or maybe in 30 seconds. I don't want my user to wait for like, X amount of minutes because, hey, what's the purpose of using AI otherwise? So I would probably go for a model in this which has a higher throughput or which probably gives me like a very fast result, more safer results rather than going for a model which will cost me maybe a lot more money but doesn't give me the output. So really understanding the product that you're building is super important before jumping into building the product in the first place. And if you see, it also gives you example by scenario. So a lot more cases like there's any kind of content that is used which is not safe, which is harmful for the users, copyright violations if you're working in regulated environments or industries where you have contracts, for example, knowledge in sensitive areas, for example, healthcare or cybersecurity or chemical. And for example, if you see these ones, which is around reasoning, so if your application is more around the agent has to reason a lot more, then you would want to use this one and so on. So there's like a whole example. I would say you have to log in and start exploring here. Um, so if I go backwards on this one, on the model catalog, you can see these are all the models it has. I think it has written 186 now. I think it was probably 181 couple of weeks back. So they have added some new models as well. So I would say go and explore it and start understanding how do you build your custom AI solution. Now from here, you would probably think, okay, this is always great, but how do we build it? So for this, you will also need an Azure subscription. So you can see, for example, I've built one Azure project for myself. So without that, none of this works. So you have to have like an Azure subscription here, and it should be active and it should like actually work. And this Azure subscription that you create actually gets used into your Foundry projects essentially. So it's really important to build an Azure subscription. It should have a region where the data is gonna sit. So going back to this one, this is essentially one of the bit. From here, let's talk about playgrounds. So playgrounds are those areas in which you can test a lot of stuff. So essentially, they have a huge version, they have a chat version, video, images, and so on. So like there's a whole example. So I'm not going to show all of them because I only have certain amount of time. I'll give you one or two examples, but feel free to explore on your own. And I will show some other examples later on. So let's start by taking, let's say, language playground. So language playground, why did I pick that? So AI, a lot of people think that AI is some new thing. Natural language processing is really as old as I would say 1950s, 1980s. And Noam Chomsky wrote a book about syntactic structures that where he actually he talks about how natural language can be interpreted, and he has written syntactic rules around that. And from there, we reached a point where we started using recurrent neural networks. We had hidden Markov models, and now we have large language models. So language playground is a really important part because a lot of times, for example, I worked as a data scientist in my previous role. What we used to do is like we used to use sentiment analysis, and we had like a lot of libraries in Python which we used to use. And sometimes you will write a statement like "great," it was really bad, and it will interpret completely wrongly because they are two different words. Now Python has a lot of great libraries. What it does for you, for example, in this case is it will make your job easier. So for example, today I say a I'll just give an example, and you have to have like a model version of the flight. So I'm currently using 4.1 in my model, and you can pick the language. So it doesn't offer just English, so you can pick whichever language you would want to use. You can also use Chinese or Croatian or Czech, whichever language you want. And when you run it, it probably like gives you an example, something like this. So what it does for you, it will give you like an overall sentiment score, but it will also give you line by line sentiment score. Now, one would wonder, why do we need it? So you are working, for example, in a user consumer behavior business where your job is to understand how the user feel about your product. So now in this one, you would see like it will give you every single detail of like on which word where the sentiment is, and then, for example, what overall sentiment is. This is one example. You can have a larger piece of text, which could be a conversation with an agent or could be something else. So a lot more areas where like I previously worked, it was a really super important use case where you would want to understand like how somebody feels about your product or your any consumer behavior. Now, another important thing I want to highlight, which is really important, is again PII. So there's generally this thing like you should not put any personally identifiable information and it should be anonymized. And this feature is super important because your name, address, phone number, and so on should never be revealed or should never be available anyone who doesn't have the right access or privileges. So in this one, I'll just take an example. For example, this is an example of a customer service chat transcript where there's a conversation between an agent and a customer. You can pick the API version that you would want to take on the left panel, and then which is the language of your text. In this case, for example, this is English. Which character do you want it to mask, and then what would that character be? So normally people use this one, but you can use anyone else if you have preference here. And it will essentially start running the entire algorithm on this one, and will start flagging wherever your PI is, and will give you details on the right. So for example, there's this person John, and it will give you the category, it will give you the offset length and the confidence essentially of this particular area. Now, the important bit is, what does this confidence mean here? Any guesses? You will not answer. Other people should, because I'm sure you know this. No. So basically, every single time something is predicted or something is given as an outcome, there is a confidence value attached to it. If an application is giving you 90% or above confidence, it's 100% sure the outcome is right. Normally, like you can classify something above, let's say, people change these values, but let's say hypothetically you took 75% or above as high confidence, something which is like 55 to 75 as mid confidence, and anything below that is low confidence, which is not acceptable. So it's super important to like make sure that the outcomes you get here are high confidence values before you start like removing this as a PII data. And interestingly, it will also provide you like a JSON version, which means like anything that it has done, it will have a JSON script as well for that. This is like useful for those people who actually want to like see through and understand like how the code actually looks in the backend, how they actually go about it, and so on. So you can use that. And the last bit I'm going to show in this one is going to be around extracting key phrases. So extracting key phrases, basically, if you have a larger piece of text, which is like a lot of conversation, maybe a report and so on, how do you extract that piece of information from that? So let's take a sample from here. For example, I'm going to take a legal document, which is a NDA, right? And in this NDA, there are several things which are attached to each other or they're related. Always select one API version because the outcomes can be slightly varied if you select a different version. Then make sure that you have the right language available. So if you are not using conversion, which means you are not converting one language to another, you can pick the one that you have. And then like when you run it, it will start giving you the relationship between different key phrases. So for example, it will highlight you every single bit in this one where like some key information is present. So you don't have to do the legwork of like finding what the key information in this document is, and it will give you a list on the side. Now this essentially, you will use it as a part of your application, not as a standalone piece. And this essentially makes a lot, like I would say, a job a lot more easier because normally we'll have to go around find this key information, maybe write an algorithm for it, and it does for you. So you can like write as long as you want. So this is some of the examples of what language playground offers. I mean, there is a lot, but obviously we don't have that much time to cover everything. So you can check the speech one. Speech is primarily for text to speech. So if you're talking in one language, you can use this to like translate that into another. And there is a translator like playground, which is, for example, you have your input in French, Spanish, or whichever language you want to convert in English. So I would say go and log in and like try, because you get some free credits, so you can use that. So now from here, I'm going to go for more tailored stuff. So let's go back to the slides and let's see some examples. So something I also want to explain right now is about the models, which is like these 5 things. I think I did mention, but I want to like emphasize one thing again, is like these models, if you don't have detailed understanding of what the model is, I would say read a description and check and understand what each of these models are, because new ones keep getting added every day. So they do provide like a lot more detail on those models. Then if you don't understand, for example, at some point, how do I interpret? So make sure you know, like, for example, four things. First is what is the quality index of your model, which is like how it performs across reasoning, coding, math, and knowledge bases. These are the four criteria. Second one is safety, which is like how low your attack score is. Third one is your, I would say, performance trade-off, which is like latency. How much time does it give to get the outcome? And then last one is your cost, because obviously you don't want to build a product which is going to be super expensive. So these are the four things. And from now, I'm going to show some examples on the newer version of Foundry. So for example, this is the older version, and this is how the newer version looks like, which is currently being built. So here, if you go in this section, which is the build section on the top, you have these options. You have agents that you can build. You can create deployments. You can fine tune your models. You have knowledge base. You have memory and a lot more, I would say. So let's take an example of building an agent. Anyone who has not built an agent so far? Not built an agent? No. Okay. Anyone else? Okay, two people. Everyone has built an agent. Okay, cool. So in this one, let's take an example of this ABC Web Kit. This is like an example. So what you would normally do is like when you build an agent here, you will get a list of models you have to like select. So this is like a global standard deployment. So these are the 4 or 5 models that I'm currently using, and you can obviously pick the ones you want, but these fit my criteria at the moment. So I've taken, for example, 4 on this one. If you want to use a voice mode, which means you want to like create a voice for experience, you have to just select the toggle, select which Azure speech you want to use, or you want to use like a custom model in here, and then provide all the detailed settings. For example, do you want interim response, proactive engagement, and so on. So you have to pick which of these settings you would want to go for. Now, I am building a marketing agent, right? So I've given an instruction here, and I've given basically that I'm giving you a data for a marketing campaign, and this agent is supposed to give me insights, analysis, and so on for that. And if you don't know how to create a good prompt, it helps you to build a good prompt as well. So for example, I'll just give an example. Let's give me, so I will just try to optimize whatever I will give it. It might take a while. It happens. But so it basically takes whatever like dummy input you give and creates the prompt for you. So you don't have to do the legwork of building the prompt as well. And if you go downwards, you will be able to see like there's this tool section. So you can connect any data source, I would say any file that you have available on this one. And you can also add like a knowledge base. Now in knowledge base, I have already built 3 of them. And there's Foundry IQ, which was added a couple of months back. So Foundry IQ basically is the way you will create a knowledge base in this one. So if you have to connect with this one, you will basically find like a connection, which is I have built, which is Shubhangi's project SRCH. If you remember, this one was here on my Microsoft Azure platform. So you can use the same connection here. And like you can give, like, for example, if you want to use any of these knowledge bases, oh, or if you want to create a new one. So if you want to create a new one, then like obviously we'll have to go to that process. Otherwise, we have to skip this agent. So I will show that later on, but okay, fine. So let's take an example. Maybe we have created a knowledge base. We've given a name 925, and you can select the model. As I said, I've deployed these 4, so I'm gonna use. You have to use a retrieval reasoning effort. If you don't understand, it gives you a detail of what retrieval reasoning effort means, which means like it ranks what the outcome will be. And you can select, for example, you want to take minimal, low, or medium. What is the retrieval process you want to use for that? Any kind of instructions you want to provide. So if you are building, if you have a large set of data and you want to prioritize one set of data, you have to give that instruction here. And here you can provide any kind of knowledge base. So you can either upload a file, or you can connect with Work IQ, which is a part of Microsoft 365, Fabric IQ, which is a part of Microsoft Fabric. You can use Azure Blob Storage, or you can use Azure AI Search Index. So normally I use this one, the last one, for like enterprise scale applications, but you can also use other two if you need to. One thing to mention here is the first two, which is Work IQ and Fabric IQ. They can collaborate with each other. So if you build one knowledge base, you can use across these 3 platforms, which are separate, but they can be collaborative to each other. And essentially, like you can either create like a knowledge base. So for example, I just take an example. I'll just take a demo folder here, and then so I've created one example, let's say sample file. So I'm gonna use this one. And if I create this one, I will give a description. This is my knowledge base for campaign and I'll start creating it. So it will take a couple of seconds to create. And once it gets created, it will like show you like this active status at the bottom, and you can just save it here. And if you click on this, you will be able to use it in any agent that you create. So if I click here, you would, I have all these agents that I've built, so I can use in any of them. I have to just pick the agent that I want to use it in. So let's say if we use this one, which I was showing ABC, it will lead me there, hopefully. Yes. Demo gods have blessed me today, so I'm happy. Okay, so you have your knowledge base here essentially, but you can also pick and choose different ones which I've built before, like these three ones I've built before, so I can use another one as well. Or if I choose not to use it, I can just, for example, remove it as well. And here, memory, which means like every interaction I make, it will be stored somewhere. It will have some memory. So in this one, what will happen is like, I want to retain my context, which means how much conversation I'm making, what questions I'm asking, and so on. So there are 2, 3 ways of building memory. So for example, by default, it auto creates a memory store, which if you are building a small scale agent like email agent or like some personal agent, you can use that. But if you're building a bigger enterprise scale agent, then you have to create a custom memory store, which I would say it takes while to build it. So you will have to make sure which one you are building for. Are you building for enterprise scale application or are you building for personal use as well? And in the bottom, there is a guardrail section. So Microsoft by default applies some guardrails, which is basically 3 categories. So there is like jailbreak, there is content safety, and there is protected material. So it's by default applied. And obviously, you can also create your own custom guardrails if you need to, right? And for example, once you have made any changes that you might have done to it, you click on the top and you can save it simply. And if you want to publish it, you can publish it as well. So once you publish this one, this version, it creates like this sort of like your web app for you. So this is like sort of your personalized agent that you can use to use it. So if you start interacting with this one, for example, hi, let's see what it does. Okay. So now what it has done is I gave this, for example, sample file as a knowledge base to it. It took all the information from that file. It had data for 3 countries, Canada, Denmark, and India, and what is the campaign outcome for all 3 of them. So in the first section, it is giving me all the key performance insight. It does give me a set of recommendation in that campaign process, essentially like what I can more do to improvise it. And then it has given specifics to the country that is performing the best, which is Denmark in that. Or and now this basically what it does is like if I build this for enterprise scale application, the same thing I replicate. This is my personalized analysis agent. Now, if I'm doing a job which takes 3 hours, I can do this in 10 minutes. Is basically the point. And this data, I ran this analysis first myself, and then I compared with what it gave, and it's right. It's not the wrong analysis. In fact, the recommendation that's given me, I would say 2 of them I didn't think on my own in the start, because the thing is because in my mind I didn't think that there could be the scope as well. So if you are building something like something which actually is reliable, you have to also make sure you're testing. Now, that is this example essentially is, for example, I've tested as human in the loop. Now, if I want to run parallel evaluation workflows, how will I do that? So you see this option on the right. So there is an evaluation workflow here. So there is obviously human evaluation, which is essentially you will do if you perform something, or you can also create like a red team. Red teaming basically you attack your agent on your own to make sure it breaks whenever it has to break. And then on the left, there is an automatic evaluation, which means like you are by default running an evaluation every single time you are interacting with it. So for example, when this evaluation ran, with this agent was running and giving me outcome, I want to run evaluation on every single step to make sure that my outcome, that whatever I'm getting is actually right. So evaluation workflows, I've built 2 of them. We can create a new one as well, but I want to show the one I've built first. So let's say this is test eval, what it shows to you. So this is, it will show you the completion runs. It will show you how many target tokens it has used and what's the score. So see, my Evaluation and still show only 77%. It's not that high actually. And then like when you go inside, it will start show you all the detailed metrics. So for example, anything that I've asked, what is the ID, which agent it has used, what's the version of this agent, it will give you all these details towards the right. And you can scroll and see like, for example, what's the pass score. So some areas it has given a higher score, some it has given a lower score. And then it will show you, for example, what the coherence is of each pass as well. Now, why do you need this detail? Any guesses? Any simple guesses? Why do you need these details? Yeah, maybe one. Any other guesses? Okay, you need these details because let's say you build this at enterprise level or as a proof of concept, or maybe you decided I want to show this to my customer as a pitch. Right? He will come, hey, now how do I know this is great? Like, there's no way to know it. How will you show those metrics? How will you show what you have done, right? Because people don't want just an application. They want something which is trustable and reliable. So now here you are realistically seeing what it's doing. It's only 77% good, which is okay. It's not super great, to be honest. And you would want to aim for 90 plus, probably, I would say, because when you're 90 plus, you have to still find out all the vulnerabilities your system contains. So, see, it shows a lot of stuff. It will show you CSAT as well, fluency, the reason for that, and so on. And I will run the analysis of the result. Let me see if it's gonna work because last time it disappointed me. So, let's see. So it sort of creates like a cluster analysis of your outcome. It will take a couple of moments. Hopefully, it will run. It will show you like a bubble chart of like how many clusters fall in which area. So then you know if your agent is ready to go in production or not in simple language. So let's see if it works. Okay, it might take a while, so we might have to wait. In the meantime, okay, cool. So for example, all the things we ran, for example, it has 22 samples of that data. It made 3 clusters from them. None of them have passed apparently, and 22 of them have failed. And it will show you why it has failed. So it has given you, for example, the first cluster shows inadequate final answer. There is incorrect tool call. The second one basically just shows you one independent cluster, which is hallucinated response, which is basically 3 samples of your data, this pink and blue. So the more data you take, the more popular this chart is. It will just give you information of where the problem sits. And without running these, I wouldn't advise anyone to just, go and just show it to someone, hey, I've built an agent, because everybody's building an agent. Like I'm sure I've seen enough agents in last couple of months, but it's more important to make sure that you like perform enough testing, and I would say negative testing, to ensure they're reliable. And you can also download any results if you might need for showing or understanding what the issue is. So this is like one example, but I think the evaluation options, if we go here, like if you want to create a new one, so see, you can create either for an agent, for a model, or for a data set. Like you can pick the one you want. So let's say we are building for an agent. These are all the different agents I've built in the past. And let's say I take an example of this one. So just for context, this second one, test agent 5, it is a group of all the pies I'm going to build on different days of the week. So this is the agent about, just for reference, right? And then I will take the scope. Do I want to check individual turn or full conversations? So I will see which one I want. Anybody knows what a turn is? So turn is like I am saying something to my agent and the agent responds back. Every single round is a turn. Okay. And your agent can have 100,000 turns. And I think a couple of years back, I worked on a project which was like a voice agent. And initially, I expected that we'll only get a few turns, people will just get tired and they will drop. Instead, people kept on talking for 45 minutes, 50 minutes. They asked different questions, and they were like, I would say probably more turns I would have expected. So I think now I'm going to ask a question. Would you say if an agent has more turns, it's a good agent or a bad agent? Like if it takes more steps to sort of qualify or solve your problem, would you say it's a good thing? Yeah, right? So a lot of times what happens is like if the agent doesn't understand in the start what it's trying to solve, it might take a few turns because it will try to clarify with you because it wants to be right. And turns is something which initially I didn't think that might be important, but then I realized, hey, it's taking too much time, to understand, to clarify things, and it's probably not a good way, right? I want my agent to understand maybe in 1, 2, 3 steps. Why is it taking n hundred steps? So if your agent contains too many terms, maybe it's a time you need to think what it's actually doing. Is it actually a good agent? Because as I said, building something is just not enough. Building something which is great is important. So if you are checking turn by turn, like every step, then you pick this option. But if you are checking full conversation in one go, then you pick this one. Simple. And then when you move from here, it will ask you three further options. For example, are you using synthetic generation? So you have to generate that data. Are you using an existing data set? For example, in our case, we have the data from our agent. Do you want to use any benchmarking standards? You have to pick. So these are all the benchmarking standards. Obviously, don't have enough time to cover, but there is a separate talk I have on this one. And if you are checking some existing traces, so you will have to start and connect those traces. So let's say for now, I'll pick this latest one that we have built just now. And I'm gonna see, so it's gonna give me like this spec, like what's the content and then what's the spec of that. Then if I click next, it will show me which model I have to pick. So if I'm currently using these models, I can pick either of these which I have deployed. I will have to pick model, or if I want to add a new one, then I will browse for that one, deploy that first. Then you have to select what query, response type, all these sections that you have. So let's say there is no query available. Maybe I'll just pick, for example, content right now. And you have to pick like every section. You have to know what your context if you are available, what your tool call is gonna be, what your tool definition. All these parameters need to be filled before you move forward. Or if you're not available, then you mark it as not available. And then configure that agent. So for example, we took test agent pi in the start. So you can obviously pick another agent if you need to. Then after that, what is the criteria of running that? So I'm checking on these steps. I can obviously remove them. So for example, are my tool calls working fine, like all of them? Then what's the quality? Like, is it fluent? Is it coherent outcome? Is it good? And I'm checking the third parameter, which is like, is it safe? You can also add a new one here. So this is like all the new ones. You can pick the one you want to pick from. So there's task adherence. There is, for example, customer satisfaction evaluator. If you go downwards, there is Rouge, which is a very popular thing in data science. You can use like similarity, or you can use like service groundedness. So you have a bunch of, I would say, huge options to pick from. And for example, if you pick relevance, you will have to select this one, content, text, okay. And then what's the threshold here? So let's say I will make threshold as 4. I want 4 on 5 for this one to pass, and then I'll confirm. So this one will get added to this list. And then after that, if I go towards next, I need to give like a name for this evaluator. Let's say, and I'll submit it. So it will basically start to create an evaluation altogether for that. So we'll keep on running until it gets outcome. This is how you can create a new evaluation. You can create as many as you want, or you can combine a bunch of them into one. And you can run for individual turns, or you can run for like one set of data. And obviously you can download the results once they get generated, or like if you want to see them. So again, like it will create an entire like list of metrics for you. So you will be able to find like what the issue is, where the issue is, and like why, like what I need to do essentially to improvise it. And the last bit really that I want to cover is fine tuning. How many people know what fine tuning is? One person? No one? Two people? Three? Okay. So I generally don't cover fine tuning in this session, but I just want to add this because somebody asked me this question 2 months ago when I was giving something similar, and they said, "Oh, why don't we just fine tune stuff? Like, why do we need to do all this?" So fine tuning is basically needed if you have a specific use case, right? If you're building an application, let's say you're working in a YouTube public sector, you have X number of residents, and you want your residents to have great council tax paying experience and great recycling, binning, and all that experience, right? And maybe your council offers, I don't know, 25 different services. Why will you create an agent that covers all the services if you are targeting only 3? So fine tuning is basically be very specific about what you're building. So if I'm building an agent that should only cover council tax issues, bin issues, or recycling issues, I will not put the other 22 services on that simply because it confuses it creates a lot more data for the large language model to like adapt or like understand. Fine tuning basically is like you have an existing set of data, you can use it to tailor your LLM and make sure it deals with those specific things. Now, in this one, like there are 3 or 4 options. So this one, for example, that I've built, I've not deployed this one. So I've taken, for example, a supervised method to train this model. And if you see, like if I deploy it, will deploy, but it's a dummy one, so I don't need to deploy one. It will show you all the metrics here. So like how many things I have done. For example, what's the token accuracy? What's the loss value for that? How many like mean values I've gotten for every single training? It will also show me any logs around that. For example, like what each one, every single step did, and then this one, which is basically a checkpoint. So every single point where it failed or didn't work or it worked, it will show you checkpoints. For example, step number, the training loss, the training mean accuracy. And if you want to deploy, this is the last bit. Now, let's say if I go back here and I want to continue this continuous fine tuning thing, I will pick here either one of them. So I will go either for supervised, direct preference, or reinforcement, like any 3 of them which I want to use. I generally use supervised or reinforcement. I've not used the second one, but feel free to try it. And let's say I use a model. So by default, I deployed 4.1 model. I'm using that. And then if I want to select a data set already, I would either use that or I will deploy a new data set. And then last one is essentially the settings I will give here, which is like, what is the batch size of my data? Is it the default or I'm going to take something custom, so I can give a number here. Similarly, number of epochs that I have. Epochs is basically number of full passes you can see on this icon. Like you can click if you don't know on like every single data set. And then what is the learning weight multiplier? How quickly my model is learning. Yeah, we have 5 minutes. So I'm going to rush through. So this is how you can fine tune a model. So if you have an existing set of data, a huge set of data, you can use a like model that you have currently available, fine tune it, and use that also as your part of agent. So this is like a whole ecosystem that works together. Cool. So we only have 5 minutes. So I will have to go back to my slides, unfortunately, and try to basically reach the end of my session, which I will. So all these slides I've already covered on my session. So I'm just gonna give a bit of brief about context engineering. So this essentially is, I would say, a leading step to this talk, which is a separate one altogether. So this word became really popular, I think, probably 2 years ago, maybe, I think. But people didn't build it that great. It's basically like, how do you build dynamic system that guides LLM? So everybody builds agent, everybody gets an answer, but everybody's like, hey, it's hallucinating, it's not great. I don't know if I can show to my customer. I don't know like if I can trust the outcome. This is a very common line I've seen like almost every conversation I have been a part of. And a lot of people think it happens due to the model flaws. It actually happens because you have missed the context, which means you haven't done data engineering really well. To make this work, you need a memory, which I think I showed on my agent. So normally you will use a long-term memory, which contains history across all sessions you would have, which is like you are a user, like for example, I am a user X, I live somewhere, I have a history, I will use that history, my preferences in this one. And this short term is essentially used if you have a very small session, like small 5-10 minute section. If you don't have this memory, it will reset every single time. So there is no value of creating an agent which resets every single time. I mean, you can just have a very short term value, but there is a large term value. Now, how does it work? So you will now normally have a context window inside that whole context engineering thing. So mathematically, if you think, this is how your context window looks like. So you can think of that every gray word sort of is your context. So if you have infinite number of tokens, you would want your agent or application to target a token. So if I have built an agent, council tax, recycling, and bin, if I'm asking a council tax question, it should target that token or that window essentially in my conversation. It's super important because it doesn't like it's not that simple, because even if you have done like everything right, when you test it, you might find flaws. So it's really important to get this right to build a great application. Now, how will you also understand in simple languages? Let's say this is your entire application, and in that entire application, let's say this is your context window. Or, for example, if your chat is growing every single time, you will see that it will remember only small bit of data or a small part of that conversation. Another way of looking at that is, let's say, coding assistant is very common in engineering. So people use it like all the time, but then they are like, hey, this doesn't give outcome. Yes, because you didn't give like the right file. So you have a 50 page PDF, right? But it only remembers these 3 files. It has no memory of what the other 47 is. So how will it give outcome? So it is only responsible for these three. It is not responsible for the rest of 47 stuff. Another way of looking at is, so this comes from one of the real world example I had, I think 6 months ago. Somebody comes and tells my file does not get updated if I give it to the agent, and I'm like, yeah, because legacy is not there in that memory, right? They loaded only three files: authorization, models, and root. They didn't load the fourth file, and the request we wanted to add was this, so it was in this file. So how will it update? So it's really important to understand that it influences the entire outcome. Yeah, you wanted to ask something? Yeah. 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 So in Codex, it looks at the folder, but for that also that folder is the context, right? So that file should sit in the folder. But for them, they didn't understand that it needs to be in the save folder to be updated. It was sitting in some other branch in some other folder, and the file this, and in their mind also they thought that this update has to be made, for example, in models.py. They did not know it has to be made in legacy. So this is basically like, one of those cases where people miss the small nuances, and then it creates that problem where like they're stuck, but the problem is like a 1 second solution sort of, or 10-second solution, I would say. So in those cases, this can still happen. All the codex of me, you're like, easier, like who can say that? Um, so in agents, how does this look like? This is the last I promise. There's no gonna be too much more than that. So in this one, like this is the entire data, let's say I provided to my model, which basically is like, you have your documents, which is your knowledge base, you have your tool calls, you have your memory files, any domain knowledge, like you're working in finance, insurance, healthcare, legal, so you will have some historical data which you can use as a knowledge base. Now this first, like this bit is going into this one, but this second bit does not require all that information, so you narrow down the scope. So you only use like, for example, as I said, like you only use council tax data or recycling data, you don't use everything else. So you narrow down the system prompt, the memory file that you need. So the information is half. Now the LLM has to deal with this only. It's not gonna look at everything because you have narrowed down the scope here, and that basically processes and goes out. And this essentially is like a cyclical process. Every single time you interact, yeah, I'm just coming. I'm just like stopping. So you have to just add all these bits to make sure that it's repeatable and probably I would say like iterative in process. And yeah, with that, my session comes to an end because I'm getting a lot more. Yeah, I couldn't like finish this one, but yeah, you will probably be able to see this one. This is just how you will add a memory to an agent. And so if you're using Foundry and you want to code your memory, you have to use this memory store. It's very simple actually, it just looks complicated. Like in this one, you have to create like a chat summary enabled option and a user profile option. You have to mark it as true because you want to create a memory for that. Second one is simple. You have to pick the model that you want to use. Then which embedding model. I just use standard one, but feel free to use other one. And in the last step, it's a beta version, but you can give like a memory store name, any name that you like. Just use like a nice, meaningful name, not like this. And then give like a description of what the memory is about. It's just like really three-step process. In the start, it's just project endpoint and then like some bits around like credential and stuff. So yeah, this is the last slide. Yeah, I think the key takeaways from this session I would say is I would encourage everybody to go and try Foundry, use it, like play around with it and like, learn how to build agents, play with the evaluation workflows. Then, obviously understand more about models, like which one you want to use and in which cases. And then lastly, like if you really want to scale it and like, make it production happy, I would say. So then make sure you've done the last bit, the context engineering, which is more like, working really good with data to, have it like really structured. So use that. And yeah, this is me. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, you have time for questions? You can ask me now. Okay, cool. So if you have questions, you can ask. Yeah. Oh, wait. Okay. So see, like every single time they release a new model, either like I would say the hallucination is better, or the context window, the token size is improved. I would say I think Claude has the best context window from my like all the approaches I've tried. And I think Opus is better than Sonnet. But if you have very simple tasks, you can use Sonnet, for example, for that. Um, but like as I said in the start, picking model depends on various factors. It's not necessary that just I just like a model. I think it performs better. I can just go and pick it. It depends on like if I'm gonna perform some like training on the data. Maybe like a smaller, like older version might also work for me because I'm gonna pick, for example, a RAG application. A lot of people are saying RAG is out of reach or scope now because there are like a lot of new approaches. But this is how generally you can judge it. And they like hallucinations improved, it has not gone away. Like they are two different things. So like when new versions are released, either like there's a wider context window, there is a better version of the model which is like more trained, has a wider set of tokens, or it's going to be something like as I said, like which has a wider context window. So I think these are a couple of things. I mean there are more, but like you'll have to like really go into the nuances and see the performance of one to another. So yeah, this is how you can judge which model is gonna be the better one. Yeah, in most cases for me, like if I use a standard one, but if I fine tune the model and so on, it works quite fine for applications. Yeah.
So I have one question for myself.
Yeah.
Is this something like anyone must try for free or?
Yeah, I think you get some free credits in the start. So, but you will need an Azure subscription. Like for example, you'll have to, yeah, you'll have to build this one like a search service in your Azure portal. I mean, this it will not like cost you, but like it is pay as you go. So the way you use it, eventually it will start charging you after that. But in the start, you will get some, I think, some free credits for this. I think.
Okay, there are two questions for the screen.
Okay.
The first one is, does this tool allow to create the entire Instagram content workflow, including post creation, publishing, performance analysis? Would my role simply be to provide the same content?
So just to understand, they're trying to create an agent for Instagram.
Kind of, I don't know.
Yeah, so yeah, they will have to provide some source data. I mean, like I think see I mean I'm not a Instagram buff, so I don't know, but like if you are using an Instagram and like you have to provide some source data that is available on your Instagram, you're trying to create posts and so on, for it to be very, very tailored. I know that some people have built agents to scan the whole Instagram and like how much reach and so on, blah, blah, like they're getting. So yeah, like you have to provide source data to some extent.
Second question from the same person. Probably it's something related to what you were talking about. And the materials, if so, will there be any issue with connecting the Facebook, Meta, and Instagram?
I mean, so you can connect either of them, but like they will be token limit obviously to use like the resources. So unless it's gonna be something like they can, I mean, it's like a pay as you go service. So if you will have to eventually pay for it, so it's not gonna be free for all the time. So be sure, be mindful of what you're gonna put inside. And like I would say, if this is their enterprise each or like I don't know proof of concept, I would say if they're building a POC, they can use something else. I would suggest. But if they're like super keen on building this, then maybe like build a like nice, I would say, data store or vector store first with that data that they get from Instagram or like Facebook or whatever, and then use that inside the agent. Like just don't go directly into like building one because it will die like it will not work for long run. So yeah.
Yeah. What's the tracking model?
So yeah, it's pay as you go. And like in the starting, you get some free credits to like explore the platform. But once you create, like for example, uh, once you create like a resource on Azure, you can obviously use a search service which I told about, Azure AI search service. So if you see this one here, like you can create like this, and it will start charging you. So it will ask obviously for your token usage. Yes. Yeah, I mean, so you go and check the cost. I would say like here, for example, in this model catalog, find the ones if you're like if you're building a proof of concept, you can go for like a easier like a, which is gonna be easier in like terms of cost or beneficial, and then like maybe expand to like a better model. Because I think if you use LLM as a judge for evaluation as well, I think which is one of the approaches, like you might see slight differences. So I would say like see if your goal is to just hey, I'm making an email answering agent, right? You can use, like, you don't have to worry about using the best model in the world, right? But if you are like, I'm building like like an agent which is gonna be used by my team, or maybe like by a set of people, then yeah, you have to think about this, like using the best one. I would say go for quality always, but I know there's a trade-off, as I said. So depending on use case, always decide which model and how much budget you have in your project. Pick the model based on that, because at some point it will start charging. So yeah, I guess that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Shout out from
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Happy to see all of you here. So just will take a couple of minutes to say warm words about our sponsor for this event, Apron. It's a company doing everything payments for small businesses, from collecting invoices to processing payments to submitting all the information around these payments to different ledger systems, QuickBooks, Reagent, and the rest. Happy to see every one of you here, and like just in case we are hiring, there is QR code for open position of software engineer. So take a look. Thank you.
I don't think so. So yeah, the pizza is there, and we should be back around 8 o'clock. Yeah, and online as well.
Okay, and I have just 30 minutes or
second session, which I think it will be completely different from the previous one, about different topic. This is more DevX, which I'm kind of like passionate about as well. So let's see.
okay. All right. Thank you, Martin. Thanks to everyone for coming along as well today. And thanks for Shubhangi for her talk, very interesting. Okay, a little bit about myself. I'm a Java developer, but I started out a very long time ago in the days of the dinosaurs as a C developer, became a C++ developer, and now, you know, for my sins, I'm a Java developer. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about today is developer experience, and it's not just about coding. So everyone in this room, I'm sure, is familiar with the concept of UX, user experience, and we know that it's good to have good user experience because it actually makes a difference to businesses. You can either kill or you can make an application very successful depending upon UX. And this is well known. Everyone knows this stuff now. Everyone knows that you want to avoid the kind of UX you got on the left, and you want to go more towards something that you've got on the right. Okay, so what people know less about, and I actually personally didn't know about developer experience until last year. This was a new subject for me. Okay, so I've skipped ahead, sorry. But we know that good user experience results in happier users, improved user retention, so and a lower user churn. People don't leave your website or your app, and increased revenue. Likewise, for developer experience, good developer experience results in happier developers, improved employee retention, and lower employee churn, and increased revenue. And I'll come on to the increased revenue later on, because usually when I say this to people, they go, what? How can developer experience have any effect on increased revenue? You know, it doesn't make sense, but we'll come to that later on. Okay, and what is good developer experience? So it's about doing my best work with the least friction. And I'll come on to what I mean by friction later on as well. So let's talk about the day in the life of a typical developer, and hopefully this will, you know, be something that chimes with your experience as a developer. So we typically want to produce great software that improves the lives of our users, and that's why we go to work every day. Ideally, we want to be in this state called the flow state. And if any of you are runners, you know that when you get into rhythm and you're just running and you're not having to think about it, you're just free flowing effectively. You get into something you could call the zone or flow state. And that's where we can think clearly about, especially when we have tough problems to solve. And we can think about how to implement a story that we've been given by a product owner. And you can do it without distractions. That's the key thing. But typically in our days, we're not writing code all day. We've got lots of other things to do. Like we've got to clarify requirements with the product owner. We've got to create tickets to request work from the DevOps team, because we know we'll need some infrastructure in order to deploy our story. We need to create tickets to request work from IT support, e.g. installing Microsoft Office on your laptop, assuming you haven't got Office already on it. You have to chase other teams for status on one of your requests for a new API. So, you know, a couple of sprints ago, you said to team B, they're not at team B because they're worse than you, but they're just another team, right? And you asked them, you know, can you produce a REST API for me? And they said, sure, we'll put it in our backlog, but, you know, you're a couple of sprints down the line and you haven't got it yet. So you need to chase them for that. You need to understand a legacy system. So let's say you've been brought in as a developer on a system that already exists, and let's say it's 10-year-old code, and then you're asked by the product owner to make a change to it, but you haven't a clue how that code works. So you've got to try and work out what the system does at the moment before you can make a change to it. You've got to address tech debt. You know, we all have tech debt in our systems. With the best will in the world, we get tech debt. You've got to review other developers' PRs. You've got to address review comments from one of your PRs. You've got to write Confluence docs to describe what you learned in a spike. There's a long list of stuff, but you get the idea. And a couple of other things is sometimes you have to wait, let's say 30 minutes, or I've waited longer for a build to complete. And that can be frustrating because you just want to get on and you want to get your story out, but you can't because you have to wait for a long build to complete. Sometimes you have a test that's flaky. It worked fine on your local machine. You pushed it to Git, runs on CI server, doesn't work, you know, breaks the build. A lot of people are annoyed and you've got to try and fix it. So you minimize the disruption to other people. You might have to prepare for a sprint demo. You might have to, well, you probably do have to attend agile ceremonies. You might have to go to a technical architecture meeting, attend front-end design meetings, knowledge sharing meetings. You might have to create a CR for prod deployment. You might have to attend a CAB meeting to get your CR approved. You might have to, and there's companies I've worked at where I've had to do 5 a.m. deployments. That's very unfriendly to developers. So I do not enjoy doing them. You have to investigate and fix production incidents. Then if there is a production incident, you might have to go to a post-mortem meeting to look at why that production incident happened and maybe what we can learn for the future to avoid it. You might have to run ad hoc queries on ProdDB to provide business insights for management, because they're asking you, like, how many users have we actually got? Where, you know, do they get to in the system in terms of the user journey? What's the most popular pages, etc. You might have to monitor prod Grafana dashboards to see what the health of the system is. Okay, what I've just listed there, and you know, that was a hell of a lot of things, and I'm not saying that you'll do all of those every day, but that is all friction. So what it is if this means that implementing your story means overcoming friction, this is the opposite of being in the flow state. So we're not running free, we're being slowed down. So what's the problem with this? You might say, well, that's life. You know, we've got to do all these things. You know, that's just the life of a developer. But you know, you can see the list of things I put there, which is a massive list, and that's probably not everything. There's probably things that you can think of that you have in your day. that I haven't listed, involves lots of context switching. And we know there's been lots of psychological studies done that context switching is hard on the brain. Every time you switch, you lose, a bit like LLMs, you lose some context. And then when you switch back, you go, where was I? Right, okay, I was there. Right, I can carry on. Oh, now I've got to switch context to something else. And this, a related thing is cognitive load. And I'll come across, I'll go across this topic of what cognitive load is. But again, it's about, you know, what the load that's being put on your brain is to do what you need to do. And all of these things that create friction, in the worst case, they can lead to burnout. And I've definitely seen people burn out in the software industry. And in the worst case, people leaving the company. And that's not good for companies. So one of the things we'll talk about later is what can companies do to avoid employees burning out and leaving the company. And as I said, this is bad for the bottom line of the company. So, you know, the way to pitch this, you know, if I've actually spoken to CEOs and CTOs, and they say to me, well, you know, this is all great what you're talking about, but, you know, I can't really afford this. Well, you can afford it because hiring replacements for developers is more expensive than keeping existing developers. So if you want to keep on paying to hire new developers, then don't worry about developer experience and just carry on as you are. Okay, let's talk about what motivates developers. Why do people become developers? Why do they stay in the job? They like doing, you know, we like doing useful work, hopefully something that actually gets to see the light of the day. We like being respected and valued, making a difference to the lives of our users, learning and advancing our careers, coming along to meetups like this helps. Being challenged but not burnt out, and being financially rewarded for our work. Okay, so from a business point of view, companies, I mean, you're going to think I'm talking, you know, stating the obvious here, but companies care about the bottom line, how much revenue they make and what their costs are, and the profits are the difference between the revenue and the cost. So companies with development departments often try to measure how effective their development department is, and software departments are often seen as a cost, as an overhead. So companies want to ensure that their software development cost is spent optimally. In order to do that, companies often measure developer performance. However, measuring developer performance is meaningless unless you measure developer experience, and I'll hopefully convince you of that as we go along. So traditionally, the way of measuring productivity was by looking at output. So you can look at number of Git commits by a developer or by a team. You can look at story points. However, now in the age of AI, coding assistants, looking at, you know, the number of Git commits, it's a bit like lines of code. No one looks at lines of code anymore, but people still, I've been surprised, look at, you know, number of Git commits. But again, that's meaningless because, you know, you can talk to a coding assistant and they'll generate you, you know, a commit in seconds, you know. So it's very easy if that's the metric that you're being judged on, you know, it's very easy to satisfy the Git commit criteria. But that's not really business value for the company. What's better is to look at what we call outcome. And what you're looking at is business impact. And so an example might be increasing website traffic from 10,000 to 15,000 visits per month within the next quarter. And that is something that's going to make a difference to the revenue of the business. You know, I talked about how developer experience can make a difference. So this is hopefully one case where it can make a difference. Okay, so what are the things that affect developer experience? So studies have been done on this, and what they found is one of the big factors is collaboration. So that's collaboration between developers and also collaboration between engineering and product management. And I'll talk about this later on because I've definitely worked in companies where product and engineering do not work together, and they actually work against each other, and that's not good for business revenue. The other thing that's important for good developer experience is psychological safety, and that's the belief that one will not be punished or humiliated for speaking up with ideas, questions, concerns. In teams, it refers to team members believing that they can take risks without being shamed, blamed by their team members. Where this really matters is when it comes to innovation. So innovation is all about taking risks, trying experiments, and what we always say in Agile is fail fast, try stuff. If it fails, it's not a problem because you're doing things in an Agile way, and hopefully the cost of that when you find out your approach doesn't work is minimal. But that can only happen in a company that has psychological safety, where mistakes are tolerated. If you work in a company that does not tolerate mistakes, the opportunity for innovation is very low, and that company will probably not do very well. They definitely will not disrupt markets. To disrupt markets, you have to be innovative. So the other factors that make a difference to a good developer experience are deployment. How easy is it to deploy to an environment? And you might think, well, we all know we can deploy to an environment, but I've worked in places where to deploy to an environment, you have to run a script. And before you run the script, you have to edit it. You have to change it for your particular circumstance. There's the scope for error, and it's just an unnecessarily complicated process that we don't need to have. We talked about developer flow earlier on. When developers get into the zone, that's the ideal state we want to be. Testability is how easy is it to test the code. So if you've got code that's not easy to test, that can be very frustrating. We probably all know as developers, we've been working on a user story, but we found, especially if you're working with a legacy system, if it's hard to test, you can't get the story out, because unless you don't have any tests and you don't look at code coverage, then it's great, no problem. But if you actually look at code coverage and you have to satisfy a certain threshold of code coverage, so in order to get your story out, then testability is very important. The other thing that's important is development and release. How often can you release? So there's the concept of continuous delivery, whereby you may not deploy to production every day, but you may deploy to a test environment. But again, if you've got to manually run scripts, etc., it's unlikely that you're going to do that very frequently. Ideally, you want to be able to push your code and automatically it gets deployed, and that's continuous delivery. And then lastly, there's operability. How easy is it to monitor the system once you've got it into production? Because if you deploy something to production, but you have no idea when problems occur, then when production incidents do occur, you're going to find it very hard to diagnose the issues. And you're probably going to have someone breathing down your neck saying, when's it going to be fixed? When's it going to be fixed? When's it going to be fixed? Okay. So what's the outcome of better developer experience? Well, developers feel that they're more creative, productive, and able to learn at work. Teams have better code quality, less tech debt, and fewer production incidents. Organizations have better innovation, retention of developers, and maybe also customers. I was talking about revenue earlier on, profits. This is how it makes a difference. And we talked about flow state. This is the thing that really helps developer experience. So that's when you can do deep concentration work, and it's engaging, motivating work without interruptions, e.g. meetings and Slack messages. What also helps is shorter feedback loops. So if you're developing a story and you have questions about the requirements, if you can get quick answers about those requirements from the product owner, that's going to help you. If you've got to wait, that's going to slow you down. And again, it's about time to market. That's going to slow down the time it takes to get that story out to production and effectively to market. And you may not be able to beat the competition. Competition might get their feature out before you do. The other thing that makes a difference is getting PR approval. I know I've waited weeks for PRs to be approved, and that's very frustrating. So again, the shorter these kind of feedback loops can be, the better the developer experience is. Also getting feedback from your CI server, the shorter your CI pipeline run is, the better. If you've got a pipeline that takes half an hour or an hour even, I've seen pipelines that take an hour to run, that's going to make the feedback loop that you get slower. So ideally, you want your CI pipeline to run as quickly as possible. So what negatively influences the above positive outcomes? So cognitive load, I mentioned this concept before. So when you have to understand complex existing code so that you can make a change to it, that is something that takes a strain on your brain. Doing complex deployments is likewise cognitive load. Managing complex processes, e.g. change requests or creating an IT support ticket, that again stops your flow. And it's not really what you want to be doing. You want to be working on your user story, but then you find you've got to do these other things, admin things, that just get in the way effectively. Sometimes using complex tools like build tools or infrastructure as code. Again, if that is very complicated to use, it's going to make your life hard as a developer. We'll talk later on about how we can minimize the complexity in these things and make the life of developers easier. So to summarize, the positive effects from a business perspective of better DevX is better flow states, which increases productivity, lower cognitive load, increases innovation, and faster feedback loops result in reduction in tech debt. So the negative effects from a business perspective for developer experience is reduced developer engagement. In the worst case, and I've worked in companies where people just lose interest in what they're doing and they start focusing on their own personal projects, which are more interesting to them than what they're doing at work. That's not good from a company's point of view. That means that developer is probably not as productive as they could be. So, you know, it's important from a company point of view that you keep your staff motivated. And, you know, people gossip at work. And if one person says, you know, this company isn't a very good company to work at, they give you boring work to do, people will chat at lunchtime or over coffee, and, you know, these kind of views spread within the company. That's not good as well. If we talk about psychological safety, if people aren't allowed to speak up and raise concerns, again, that will negatively influence how developers as employees view the company. So ideally, from a company point of view, they want to make it as easy as possible for any developers to raise concerns. and we talked about story points or number of Git commits. People, and I've seen this, people will game the system. They'll game the metrics so that they achieve what they have to achieve to get over the gate. But it doesn't achieve anything. All it's doing is you're ticking a box, and it just frustrates developers. After all that, developers become reactive, not proactive. They're not trying to be innovative, as I was saying earlier on. They're just thinking, right, I've got to go to work today. I've got to do this job because I've been told to do it, but I'm really not motivated, and I'm actually going to try and look for a job on LinkedIn, and we'll see what's out there. That's not a good place for any company to be in. People might be working overtime to achieve their objectives, which results eventually in burnout, and eventually they leave the job. Okay, I'm running out of time, but I'm gonna. So when I've talked to CTOs and CEOs about developer experience, they say, like, this is all theory, great, but how does this affect my business? So what I say to them is try a technique called value stream mapping. So what you can do is either, if you're working physically in an office, everyone isn't working remotely, then if you get people in a room and you have a physical whiteboard, you just get people, you ask people, what is it that it takes for you to take a story from requirements? So product owner gives you requirements, or we can even go back to product owner. How does a product owner write the story in the first place? What are the steps you've got to go through to get it to production? And this is a vastly simplified diagram. When I've done this, there's typically a lot more boxes than this. And I'm sure you can imagine for your development process that you probably go through, there's a lot more process. But what I want to highlight is a couple of things, that there are spaces between each of these steps, and typically there's waiting time. So there's waiting time between user developer writing your story, getting your tests working. Then you have to wait for a PR. That might be days, it might be weeks. You've got to wait. That's lost time for the business. Once you've got the PR approved, you might have feedback, review comments that you've got to address. So you've got some time lost there. Once that's been merged into main, you may have to wait for a QA resource to be available. You've lost time there. And again, I've had times where my story hasn't been tested for days, or sometimes the next sprint, so, that's again, lost time. Again, when the QA tests your story, they may have some issues that they raise, and that you've got to go back. So again, the time's building up, and then let's say you've got to get it deployed to an environment. We talked about creating a ticket for the DevOps team. That they have got their own backlog. It's not going to be something they can do like immediately. It goes into their backlog. Sometimes I've waited weeks before the DevOps team pick up the story, so that's lost time. You still okay for time? Okay. And again, once it's actually been, the DevOps team have created the infrastructure, then you've got to finally deploy it to the environment. So we can talk about the time it takes from the story being picked up from the backlog to actually being deployed to production. Might be weeks, or in the worst case, it might be months. That's not good. So when I've mentioned this kind of thing to CTOs, they go, okay, I see why we want to make developer experience a bit better, because this is costing my business money. Are we still okay to carry on? Yeah, I'm going to carry on. Okay, so another technique you can use to measure developer experience is something called DORA metrics. Have people come across DORA metrics? I see one person has it. Okay, a couple of people have. I'll quickly go through them. So DORA metrics are ways of looking at two things: throughput and stability of your system. So these are sort of objective ways of looking at how easy it is to make changes and how stable, once you've made changes to the system, how stable the system is after the change. So change lead time is the amount of time it takes for a change to go from committed to Git, let's say, to deployed in production. And based upon that diagram I just showed you, it can be, weeks, maybe months. Deployment frequency, how frequently do you deploy? I mean, I've said to people, you can deploy several times a day to production, and people look at me and they say, no, that's not possible. Well, traditionally that wasn't possible, but if you use continuous delivery, it is possible. Failed deployment recovery time. How long does it take to recover from a deployment that fails and requires immediate intervention? Again, this metric gives you an idea of, okay, I've got 5 minutes to go, so I'm going to have to probably wrap up in a bit. It gives you an idea of, things go wrong, but how long does it take you to recover from a failed deployment? And let's talk about instability. So change failure rate. So what's the ratio of deployments that are successful versus ones that require immediate intervention, likely resulting in a rollback or a hotfix to quickly remediate any issues. Again, this measure is useful to see, how much quality did you put in before you deploy to production? Because if you've got lots of tests, good code coverage, hopefully, and you tested your deployment in lower level environments, hopefully you're less likely to have issues with failed deployments in production. But with the best will in the world, you will have them. But it's good to have this change failure rate as a metric to see how often these kind of issues occur. And deployment rework rate is the ratio of deployments that are unplanned, but happen as a result of an incident in production. So really, we're talking about how often do you have incidents in production? And again, that is a measure, I think, of quality. I think, again, if we're talking to people at management level, these numbers make a difference because, sorry. Yeah, yeah, sure. But how okay, yeah. So I've just been reading a book about it, and I personally think it doesn't change anything. The only thing that's changed is the speed at which code can be written. But well, that's my opinion anyway. But I'm happy to. Do you have another view? Sure. Yep. Sure. I mean, I think because like you, I use an AI coding assistant every day. I think the issues that I've talked about how easy or hard it is to make a change still apply. So writing code, as we've said, if we go back to that diagram, writing code is only that box on the left. There's all the other things that happen after it. And I don't think AI agents or AI coding assistants change any of that, or do you think they do? That's true. That is true. I haven't done that. I've just used it on the left box, but yeah, you could get it to do all of that indeed. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Am I okay to carry on from you? Okay. All right. I'm going to go. One word of caution with DORA metrics is that there is a danger that the above metrics can be used for the purpose of individual performance reviews, and that is not the intention of DORA metrics. The intention is to find friction in the developer experience and try and remove that friction. The other thing companies can do is run customer satisfaction surveys where customers are developers. Okay, I'm going to have to skip a lot of slides because I've run out of time, but I was going to talk about some case studies where we actually talk about the reality of a lot of things I've mentioned, but I'm going to skip through a lot of this. One thing I did want to do is mention this. I don't know if anyone's familiar with the Western three cultural model. If you're not, I think this is really useful. You can Google for it. There was a psychologist called Ron Westrum who did a study back in 2004. He looked at how organizations cope with crises. He looked at the airline industry and healthcare, like hospitals and etc. And what he found is there's three kinds of organizations, which he called pathological or power-oriented, bureaucratic or rule-oriented, and generative or performance-oriented. And what he found was the most successful organizations are the ones that are generative. I haven't got time to go through it, but if you Google for it, it's really interesting to look at why that is the case. I am going to skip ahead to, oops, just to say the material that I presented today was really a summary of stuff I've read in these books. So the book Accelerate is an excellent book. I highly recommend it. The book I'm reading at the moment is Frictionless. It's about how to eliminate or reduce friction. And we talked about continuous delivery. You're probably familiar with this. This is a really famous book by Dave Farley and Jez Humble. And unfortunately, I didn't have time to talk about two techniques, but impact mapping and value stream mapping, I highly recommend. And that is it. I'm going to say thank you and any questions. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. 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 I mean, and you know, this is talk about company culture really. The traditional way of running software departments is to have developers who develop, QAs who test, and I think I hope it's not going to offend anyone who's in the room or listening online, but I think the role of QA should be done by developers. Developers should test their code. They shouldn't throw code. I've seen this. People throw code over the fence and say, right, not my problem. I've written the code. You test it now. That is not a good attitude. You know, it needs to be the attitude of, you know, you build it, you run it. So you take responsibility for taking a story from requirements to production. So again, I think there should be no separate DevOps function. developers and DevOps should be one. And in a way, that's what the word was meant to be about, right? It was supposed to be developer development and operations as well. Okay, we're going to have to finish up. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
We got the fuck as well. Thank you, dog.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all for coming. Discussions, we go into the pub. I don't know how many people will be